going to talk about randomized trials. They used a special design, a randomized design, to understand this issue better. This background Willie brought up when we were talking about the lessons learned. In Uganda, 45 to 50% of HIV-infected partners were uninfected. So there's a lot of people who are living with an infected partner who are not infected, but they don't know their own status. And so if they don't know their status, there's no way they can protect themselves from being infected by their partner. And 19% of children of infected adults had undiagnosed infections. So we have children who are infected that don't know their status, and we cannot get them on treatment. So for this study, the objective was whether or not there was a difference between VCT at home and VCT at the clinic and the uptake of testing. So is there a difference between offering testing at the clinic versus offering the testing at home and the uptake of HIV testing? So there were two groups in the study. They called them Arm 1 and Arm 2. And they were randomized to the different interventions. The home-based group and the clinic-based group. But can you describe to me what was the intervention, the clinic-based group? How did they get invited to the clinic? How did they end up at the clinic? So let's say I was the patient. I went to the clinic, and I'm HIV positive. I was given vouchers, and I take those vouchers home, and I give the vouchers to my family members to invite them to come to the clinic and also be tested. So the clinic-based treatment used vouchers where the person who had HIV went home and gave the vouchers to their family to invite them to come. And then there is the home-based group. What was their intervention? So if I am a patient with HIV and I am in the home-based arm, they ask me, is it okay for us to come to your home and test your family members? And if I say yes, they come to my home and they offer testing in my home. If I am the HIV patient in the clinic-based arm, they say, is it okay for us to test your family members? And I say yes, and they give me vouchers to give to home to invite them to the clinic. Okay, so in both cases, I had to say, yes, you can test my family members. And either they gave me vouchers for the family to come to the clinic, or they came to my home to test the family members. The study design for this, there were two different interventions. The clinic-based arm where they got treatments, the HIV-infected individual, if they agreed to be part of the study, got a voucher to give to their family to invite them to the clinic. The home-based arm, the HIV-infected individual, if they consented, they were visited at home and their family members were tested. There were 44 different possible groups, and they just randomized 22 to get the clinic-based care and 22 to get the home-based care. So an individual in a cluster in group 1, all those individuals would get the vouchers. All the individuals in the clusters in group 2 would be visited at home. So they were randomized in groups. A very important question is, what do we do about balance? How do we know if we've achieved balance in our study through randomization? And what do we do if we have not? So when you have a study that's a randomized trial, that first table is always going to look at this issue around balance. So it's going to look at different factors in the study and look at the two different groups and see if they are the same or not. Now, they're never going to be exact the same. There's always going to be a few differences. There's 44% males in the home-based arm versus 46% in the clinic arm. They're never going to be exactly the same. So what we're really looking for in balance is, are they significantly different? Is there any area that there's a significant difference between the home-based arm and the clinic-based arm that's going to make me worry about balance? What things do I need to see to be able to say they are significantly different? A p-value or a confidence interval. I want you to talk about this, look at this to see if there's any imbalances, so any significant differences, and look at the footnotes. They actually have the p-values hidden at the bottom of the table in footnotes. So look at your table and tell me, is there any significant difference between the two groups? In this table, they're comparing the different possible confounders between the two different arms. And the question is, did they achieve balance? I'm looking for any possible significant differences between the home arm and the clinic arm. The p-values in this case are hidden. And so if you look at the footnote, it's going to have the factors that are significantly different between the two groups. So here's one significant p-value, here is another significant p-value. And then the trick is to match the symbol back to the symbol in the paper. So here's one of the significant p-values, and it matches to relationship to the index client. So the relationship to the index client is significantly different between the two different groups. What other factor was significantly different between the two groups? Relationship of tested household members to the index client. So you see the footnote here, and it matches to this footnote. That is also significant. So that is how you can tell which factors are significantly different when they use footnotes. If there is no footnote, that means there is no evidence of a significant difference. Okay? So there are two things, Frederick, that are not balanced between the two groups. There are two things that are not balanced. So do I just throw the study away? No, I just make sure that when I'm doing my analysis that I try to control for those things to minimize confounding bias. So then you come to table 3, and this is the key results table of the study, where they're looking at uptake of HIV testing by study arm, adjusting for age and gender. So based on this study, looking at this table, which intervention had the highest uptake of VCT, and is it significant? So the VCT uptake is higher in the home arm because this odds ratio is bigger than 1. And it is significantly higher, and I know that because the p-value is less than 0.05. The p-value is less than 0.05. I could have also looked at the confidence interval, and what would I look at in the confidence interval to talk about significance? How can I use this to say it is significant? So because 1 is not inside the confidence interval, we can also use that. So remember I said either p-values or confidence intervals. In this case, they gave you both. Okay? But they tell you the same thing. So the authors determined that the uptake was higher with home testing. So I want you to think about the strengths and limitations of this study. It's actually the first study that we've read that does not have a limitation section. Okay, so I want you to think on your own, what could be some of the limitations of this study and this design? And then in terms of could they have used another study design, they could have answered this with a cohort study. They maybe could have answered it with a cross-sectional study or a case control study. But they chose a randomized study to remove any of the confounding bias, or as much confounding bias as they could, to really understand the impact of home-based testing on uptake of testing. Okay? So you could have used another study design, but the strength of using a randomized trial is to remove those external confounders and the other biases to really fully understand the effect of the intervention on uptake of testing.